Greetings, friends. Today, we embark on another captivating journey into the sinister realm of true crime stories. Get ready to delve into and unravel the secrets of a chilling and dramatic case. Are you ready for this gripping investigation? Let's begin. On a chilly winter evening in Evansville, Indiana, a hard-working firefighter named Robbie D was making his way home after yet another long shift at the station. The 51-year-old veteran firefighter had been serving his community since the autumn of 1991, and by the winter of 2019, he was approaching 3 decades of dedicated service. As Robbie walked up the driveway towards the front door of his modest family home, he was suddenly and unexpectedly struck from behind by multiple gunshots. The sound of the gunfire pierced the tranquil evening, shattering the peaceful suburban scene. Becky, Robbie's wife, had been standing just inside the kitchen, preparing a simple dinner of pork chops. From the window, she should have been able to catch a glimpse of her husband as he emerged from his truck, carrying his work gear. But instead of seeing her husband, Becky heard the all-too-familiar sound of gravel crunching under the tires, followed by the startling crack of gunshots. Rushing to the front door, Becky found her beloved Robbie lying on the ground, wounded and bleeding. In a panic, she immediately called 911, her voice trembling as she pleaded for an ambulance. "My husband just got shot," she cried, struggling to provide the operator with more details. "I don't know. All I saw was his headlights pull into the driveway, and then I heard a bunch of popping." The 911 operator tried to calm Becky down, asking her to describe the situation in more detail. But Becky was overwhelmed with fear and confusion, unable to offer any specifics about the vehicle or the shooter. All she could tell them was that Robbie, her 61-year-old husband, was lying on the front walkway, alive, but in desperate need of medical attention. As the emergency services rushed to the scene, the quiet, close-knit community of Evansville was shaken to its core. The investigation that followed would be a complex and personal one, as those seeking justice for Robbie would have to piece together a puzzle with no clear-cut answers. In the end, there would be no smoking gun, only a series of suspicions and coincidences that would ultimately lead them to the truth. As the police and firefighters rushed to the scene, they found Robbie lying on the ground, struggling to breathe. Despite their best efforts, there was nothing they could do. Robbie had succumbed to his injuries before the ambulance could even transport him. The 51-year-old firefighter, who had dedicated his life to serving his community, had been gunned down in his own driveway. The news of Robbie's tragic death sent shockwaves through the close-knit community of Evansville. Robbie was known as a kind-hearted and hard-working family man, and the idea that he could have been targeted and executed in front of his own home was simply inconceivable. For the firefighters and police officers who responded to the scene, the experience of trying to save one of their own was something they were not prepared for. Becky, Robbie's wife, had been inside the house preparing dinner when the gunshots rang out. She had rushed to the front door, but saw nothing, and then went to the side door to find her husband lying on the ground, wounded and bleeding. Her panicked 911 call had been a desperate plea for help, but by the time the emergency services arrived, it was too late. Investigators combed the scene, but found no spent shell casings and no witnesses who had seen anything suspicious before or after the shooting. The mixture of ammunition recovered during the autopsy, however, pointed to a specific type of revolver, the Taurus Judge, which can fire both buckshot and .45 caliber rounds. A search of the local area revealed that a Taurus Judge had been stolen from a pawn shop just 6 months earlier, located less than a 15-minute drive from Robbie's home. While the source of the weapon seemed clear, the identity of the shooter remained a mystery. Becky's sudden appearance at the fire station the day after the murder, inquiring about Robbie's pension and death benefits, only added to the growing suspicions surrounding the case. The firefighters, struggling with their own grief and the loss of a dear friend, found themselves grappling with the unsettling possibility that one of their own may have been the target of a premeditated attack. As the investigation unfolded, the puzzle pieces slowly began to come together, revealing a complex and deeply personal story. The community of Evansville, shaken to its core by the senseless tragedy, waited with bated breath for the truth to emerge, hoping that justice would be served for the fallen firefighter who had dedicated his life to protecting and serving others. The investigation into Robbie's murder took a startling turn when detectives discovered that Becky, his widow, had been acting suspiciously in the aftermath of the tragedy. Less than 12 hours after Robbie's death, Becky had already inquired about his pension and death benefits, raising eyebrows among his grieving colleagues. When Becky was asked to accompany the police and FBI for further questioning, her responses only deepened the mystery. She had provided detailed accounts of her activities and contacts on the day of the murder, but investigators soon uncovered a discrepancy. A 4-minute phone call from a local number that Becky had failed to mention and had subsequently deleted from her call log. The investigators pressed Becky, knowing that they already had the answers. The phone number belonged to Larry Richmond, a convicted murderer who was engaged to Becky's sister, Amanda. Becky's claims of not knowing Larry well were quickly dispelled as the detectives presented evidence of their close social relationship, including a double date they had been on together. The deleted call was not the only one that raised red flags. Investigators found that Becky had a habit of clearing her phone's call history, having deleted 28 additional calls in the previous 2 months, 15 of which were to Larry. While the content of these calls could not be proven, the sheer volume of communication between the two, coupled with Becky's attempts to conceal it, painted a troubling picture. Faced with the mounting evidence, Becky's story began to unravel. Detectives discovered a letter written by Robbie, hidden in the couple's bedroom, in which he had expressed his suspicions about his wife's infidelity and the reappearance of a certain individual in her life. The implications were clear. Becky's involvement in her husband's murder could not be ignored. Ultimately, Becky was arrested and charged with obstruction of justice for the deletion of the phone call on the night of the murder and for her blatant lies to the investigators. The community of Evansville, already reeling from the loss of one of their own, now grappled with the shocking revelation that the tragedy may have been the result of a deeply personal betrayal. As the investigation continued, the pieces of the puzzle slowly fell into place, painting a complex and disturbing picture of a crime that had shattered the tranquility of this close-knit suburban neighborhood. The pursuit of justice for Robbie would require unraveling a web of deceit, uncovering the truth behind the deleted phone calls, and determining the true nature of the relationship between Becky and the convicted killer who had re-entered her life. Despite the initial charges of obstruction of justice against Becky, The police were unable to gather sufficient evidence to pursue more significant charges at that time. Becky was released on bail, but the investigation continued. The police then turned their attention to Larry Richmond Sr. and his son, Larry Richmond Jr. It was discovered that the younger Larry had stolen the Taurus Judge revolver from the River City pawn shop, the same weapon that was believed to have been used in Robbie's murder. Larry Jr. admitted to giving the gun to his father just 2 days before the shooting. The elder Larry Richmond was quickly apprehended and charged with being a felon in possession of a firearm and possessing a firearm with an obliterated serial number. He was swiftly sent back to prison, having committed additional felonies shortly after his parole. With the suspected gunman in custody, the police turned their focus to Becky, the widow, believing that she was also involved in the conspiracy to murder her husband. Becky was called to testify before a grand jury, and the day after her testimony, she was booked into the county jail on charges of perjury. The prosecution argued that Becky had a financial motive to want her husband dead, as she had been obsessed with his pension and death benefits. They also claimed that Becky had been engaged in an affair with Larry Richmond Sr., her sister's fiancé, providing an additional motive for the murder. During the trial, Becky's son, Nathaniel, took the stand for the prosecution. He testified that his mother had spoken about Robbie's pension and benefits regularly, even on the night of his death. Nathaniel also revealed that his mother had a peculiar reaction to Robbie's passing, appearing more focused on the financial implications than the emotional toll. The defense, however, vehemently denied any evidence of Becky's involvement in a conspiracy to murder her husband. They argued that the state's case was built on speculation and circumstantial evidence, and that there was no proof of Becky having any conversation about plotting Robbie's death. As the trial progressed, the community of Evansville remained deeply invested in the outcome, hoping that justice would be served for the fallen firefighter whose life had been tragically cut short. The resolution of this complex and emotionally charged case would have far-reaching implications, not only for Robbie's family, but for the entire community that had been shaken by this senseless act of violence. During the trial, the prosecution presented 2 handwritten notes as evidence of a conspiracy between Becky and Larry Richmond Sr. One note found inside a sympathy card at Robbie's funeral simply stated, "We need to talk," and included a phone number for Larry. The other note, verified by a handwriting expert, was passed to Becky while she was in custody. In this note, Larry urged Becky to remain quiet and not take a plea deal, as he believed the case against her was weak. The defense, however, challenged the significance of these notes, arguing that the prosecution lacked concrete evidence of any communication or relationship between Becky and Larry regarding the murder. The lead detective in the investigation acknowledged that, despite the deleted phone call, he had no knowledge of the content of the conversation and could not definitively prove that Becky and Larry had discussed the crime. The defense also highlighted the lack of evidence that Becky had ever initiated contact with Larry, casting doubt on the prosecution's claim that the two were engaged in an affair. The detective confirmed that the investigation had not uncovered any communication between Becky and Larry that would suggest they were lovers. Ultimately, the defense argued that the state's case was built on speculation and circumstantial evidence, and that there was no proof of Becky's involvement in a conspiracy to murder her husband. They maintained that the prosecution's allegations of a financial motive and an affair were unsupported by the evidence presented. The testimony of Larry Richmond Jr. proved to be a crucial piece of the puzzle. He recounted how he had stolen the Taurus Judge revolver from the pawn shop and given it to his father, Larry Richmond Sr., just days before Robbie's murder. Larry Jr. also claimed to have witnessed a brief encounter between Becky and his father, during which they spoke and shared a kiss before parting ways. As the trial progressed, the community of Evansville remained deeply invested in the outcome, hoping that justice would be served for the fallen firefighter. The resolution of this complex and emotionally charged case would have far-reaching implications, not only for Robbie's family, but for the entire community that had been shaken by this senseless act of violence. According to the testimony, Larry Richmond Jr. claimed to have witnessed a brief encounter between Becky and his father, Larry Richmond Sr., in their vehicle. Larry Jr. stated that he was in the back seat while his father was driving, and Becky was in the passenger seat. During this encounter, Becky and Larry Sr. spoke briefly and then shared a kiss before Becky exited the vehicle. The prosecution presented strong evidence linking Larry Richmond Sr. to the murder of Robbie Dorr. Cell phone location data placed Larry Sr. in the vicinity of Robbie's house before and after the shooting, and his device was powered off during the time of the murder. Investigators recovered over 42,000 files from Larry Singh's iPhone, including 15 location hits in a 67-minute cluster surrounding Robbie's residence. The data also showed Larry Sr. driving away from the Dorr home after the shooting. After deliberating for approximately 4 hours, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on both the murder and conspiracy charges against Elizabeth Dorr. At her sentencing hearing, Becky's son Nathaniel spoke emotionally about the pain her actions had caused the family, while Becky herself once again proclaimed her innocence and vowed to appeal the conviction. Elizabeth Dorr was ultimately sentenced to a total of 90 years in prison, with the murder and conspiracy charges to be served consecutively. For Robbie's family and the Evansville community, this verdict represented a long-awaited sense of justice, though nothing could truly bring back the beloved firefighter whose life was tragically cut short. The trial and sentencing proceedings were deeply emotional, with Robbie's daughter Lindsay, the extended Dorr family, and Robbie's many firefighting brothers in attendance. Despite the gravity of the situation, the community came together in the pursuit of justice for Robbie, hoping that this verdict would provide a sense of closure and allow him to finally rest in peace. Elizabeth Dorr's cruel and inhumane behavior deserved the harsh sentence she received. Abusing the emotions of others to carry out such a cruel plot is an unforgivable crime. The scientific and digital evidence collected during the investigation provided sharp evidence, forcing Elizabeth Dorr to take responsibility before the law. Location data from Larry Richmond Sr.'s mobile device determined he was near the scene at the time of the crime, and turning off the device immediately after the call with Becky further solidified his role in the crime. Electronic documents obtained from Larry Richmond Sr.'s phone also provided important evidence, proving the connection between him and Becky in this conspiracy. This scientific and digital evidence surpassed all reasonable doubt, forcing the jury to declare Elizabeth Dorr guilty. Elizabeth Dorr's 90-year prison sentence reflects the severity of the justice system in dealing with such heinous crimes. This is not only a worthy punishment, but also a clear message that society will not tolerate those who take advantage of others' emotions to commit criminal acts. This story is also a warning to everyone about the serious consequences that wrong behavior and insatiable ambition can bring. We must always remember that our every action affects those around us, and we need to act with compassion, respect, and responsibility. Please subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any intriguing cases in the True Crime Stories series. Be the first to receive updates on dramatic and thrilling crime stories.